Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our intuitive tips and tricks. My name is Jessica Canellis, and thank you again, everyone. Here is our contact information. So if you guys have any questions after this event, you can contact any single one of us here. You can contact Jim Castellano, our president and owner, myself, Jessica Canellis, and of course, everyone knows Gary for your intuitive needs. For if you're looking for maybe like a new ERP, you can contact Jim McCormick, also for HR, payroll, and time and attendance. And then if you are looking into a document management system, you can contact Brendan. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Jim Castellano so he can get us going.
Thank you, Jess. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Jess, you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so let me just go there. Everyone can see my screen. I'm presenting.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, everybody, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Today we have a large attendance today. We have over 30 companies that will be with us today. So I do have to thank our customers first off. Also, I have to thank my account manager, my VP of the ERP side for Intuitive, and that is Gary Cerny. Gary, please say hi to everybody that you're out there.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Gary Cerny here. Thank you for coming today. Great to work with all of you and look forward to some of the newbies that are joining our webinar today. Look forward to working with you also. So again, welcome to PeopleSense Intuitive ERP today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Well, thanks, Jess. Well, first off, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jim Castellano. I'm the president and owner of PeopleSense. For some of you who do not know who I am, so I'm like I said, I'm the president and owner. I started PeopleSense in 2003, as everyone can see my screen. And so how we first got started is I was a partner with Made to Manage and Intuitive, and I branched off from there. Our core products back in those days were human resource. Can you guys hear me? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you. You're still a tad echoey, but you're good.
Okay, I'll pull back a little bit. So our key products were human resource and payroll, and us being a partner with Made to Manage and Intuitive and Consona. We then eventually were a partner with Apteam, but then Apteam in the first years pulled away from partnerships. So we now have our Intuitive and Made to Manage divisions and Acumatica. As you can see on my screen, we also do time and attendance and document management with workflow for our softwares that integrate with Acumatica, Made to Manage, and Intuitive. We have customers in over 42 states and Canada. Not sure how many states. We might be at 43, 44 now. Okay. And we have over 20 consultants nationwide that work for us. We also have consultants that are actually on the phone with us from over in Europe too, and in Canada. When we have over 250 years plus now of combined experience with all of our consultants. To give everybody just a little heads up, so you can see a lot of our team on here today that will be coming in and out. So I, Jim Castellano, you can see me at the top. We have Gary Cerny. We have Jim McCormick. He works on our ERP side on our Acumatica. I'll be passing it over to him in just a little bit. Then we have Jessica Canellis, who you heard from earlier. She works with our marketing and customer support. So any questions you might have, you can then, I'll show you at the end of the slides. You can then redirect it to Jess if you have any questions. Also, if you do have questions today, before I move on with some of the other consultants, you can actually put it into the chat mode. Is that correct, Jess? They can put it into chat.
Yep,
and
you can throw it in the question box.
In the question box. So if you see the chat in the question box, you guys can just type it inside there, and Jess will be answering or having our staff answer those throughout the day for the next two hours or so. We also have Jim Cooley, who works on our Made to Manage. If any of you would like to come out to our Made to Manage user group meeting, that will be next week, Wednesday, same time, same bat channel. We also will have Tim Lindsay with us today. We also have Larry Newby, we have Doug Roth, we have Wayne McDonald, who will start off our presentations today. You'll see that, and Jeff Vaness. I'll move on. Some of our partners that we have onto our website that I will go over with you in a little bit is, so I just have a little bit of house cleaning to do before we move on to our user group meeting where our presentations will begin. One is we have partners that some of you might be interested in. So some of our partners are Avalara, MindSight, ParTrap, Nuvi, Knowledge Sync with alerts and workflows, Power BI, barcoding, EDI, and M-Files. So if you have any questions about any of those, please get a hold of Gary or get a hold of Jessica, and they can go over some of those different things, set up a demo for you. All demos are free. Talking to us is free. So I always tease our customers. I said, we are a little different than Aptean. We don't charge you for those calls. We talk to you all the time for anything and everything that you might want to ask us about helping you as a customer. I'll move on. Here's our schedule for today. So for all of you, you might want to take a snapshot of that today, or maybe take a picture of that, but especially the bottom side, bottom part of that. We have Gary Cerny, your account manager. So if you have any questions, you can email Gary anytime or call him on his cell or his work number. Also, we also have Jessica Canellis. You can email Jessica anytime, and you can call her at our work number here. Hopefully I put those all in correctly. We have those correct for everyone. Okay. Also, I do tell everybody this. We would not be who we are today if we have to thank Aptean, because Aptean has pushed so much business to us. We have to thank them. So I thank them and our customers, you. We would not be who we are today without customers, right? So we thank you for all that you do for us and all that hopefully we can do for you. And especially my staff. Everyone saw a lot of the staff that was on here. We even have more staff on here that's helping out throughout this time for different questions, answers, and so on. And so I wanted to thank everybody for all that. Now a little bit of house cleaning. So one of the things I'm going to pass on to, and this is going to be going over to Jim McCormick. Jim McCormick will be talking about Acumatica, and I'll be passing that baton in around 3 minutes over to Jim. Also, I want to talk to everyone here about Aptean's hosted and their web version. So me personally, we help customers who are on support and off support. We also can help them with hosted sites. So if you are thinking about going hosted, let us know. With our hosted, you still own your data. You still own your agreements, everything else. If you go to Aptean's hosted site, you give up your license. And if you go to their cloud-based, their web-based, which is a browser-based, you give up your license also. So I just want to make sure we have that house cleaning done. Things that we can help with on the Intuitive side, we can help with customization. So if you want to do customizations, we can help with that. So if there's anything that you want, we can help with that. Other services that we do offer, we offer business process evaluations. Jeff Innes can come out to your site. He can do a business process evaluation, or Tim Lindsay, and they can evaluate your system and do things like that, and then tell you, do a full write-up to tell you how you can use your system better and how things are ideal for you. Any questions? I hear breathing. That might be you, Jess, so sorry about that. Also, we cannot keep doing these user group meetings without the customers, okay? So I need help from our customers, all of you, to give us ideas. So I would love for you after this webinar, during the time, saying, hey, for the next one that we want to do in October, I would love to have more ideas from all of you of how we can make this user group better. So we have to know more about that. After Jim McCormick is done, he's going to just pass it over for like 5 minutes over to Brendan James, and that's going to be for our document management before we hand it over to Wayne McDonald. Also, for some of you who do not know, and I have around 1 minute, I do want to show you our website. If you can see my screen, I'm bringing it over. Jess, can you see that?
Yes.
So all of you who do not know, our website is right here, the peoplesenseerp.com. So please visit our website. And if you do visit our website, we do see it. So it says, hey, this customer maybe has gone out there or whatever. We love that. We love to know that you're out there. Also, we also have a help desk. If you come over here to the help desk, you can click on the help desk, and then you can submit your work tickets there, right here. Also, on every one of our websites, web pages, I made sure that we have our phone number out there. So if you need to get a hold of us, please do. If you need to submit a ticket for any issues, please go out there. Also, a couple of the other things that I wanted to make sure is remember this. We are always here for you. You can call us. You can put a work ticket in. Okay, so anything that you want, please let us know your pain points. What are your pain points? We would love to know so then we can fix those and get those done for you. It will be recorded. So if anybody wants to get the recording, it should be out there by Friday. Get a hold of Jess or come out to the website. And Jess, here on the website, it will show where?
It will show on the homepage as well as under the recorded webinars.
Okay.
Under
so
resources.
Under where?
It should be under resources too as
Under
well.
resources, and you can see recorded on-demand webinars and user group recording sessions. You'll see it there. So Jess, thank you so much. I will then pass it over to Jim McCormick. I thank all of you, all the customers. Thank you guys so much. And Jim, it is all over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. So again, everybody, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Jim McCormick. I'm the sales executive covering the Acumatica ERP solution, in addition to HR and payroll. But since we're focusing on ERP today, just touch for a minute or two about Acumatica and give you an idea at a high level who Acumatica is. So very high level, Acumatica is a cloud-based ERP solution. The unique thing about it is that it was designed in the cloud. Acumatica started in about 2008, and it really focused on the needs of the small, medium-sized businesses to help them grow. Acumatica at this point has over 10,000 customers globally. So they have been, although they've been around for 12 years or so, they have really grown and taken a good piece of the market. They have a lot of innovations with what they do. One of those things that they do is, unlike most ERP solutions where the licensing is based on the number of users that you have, Acumatica actually provides you with unlimited user licensing. They look at the modules, and we look at some other factors in there for the resources, but it's unlimited user licensing and very much cost competitive, and in many cases, and a lot of our Intuitive and Made to Manage customers have been finding, comes out less for the licensing costs than the Intuitive and Made to Manage have. The other thing that sets Acumatica apart is they focus their sales and their implementation strictly through channel partners like PeopleSense. So the advantage here is that frees up their resources to innovate on the product, which they bring out semi-annual updates, which are generally speaking significant enhancements to the product. They listen to the customers, what's important, what's needed, and then they incorporate that into the solution. The other thing, by focusing on partners to sell and implement the solution, is that partners like PeopleSense, we understand Intuitive, we understand Made to Manage, and we understand Acumatica. So knowing both systems allows us better flexibility and better capabilities in helping you. We know your business, we understand how you're using things, and be able to make that transition much smoother, much more seamless. So, at a very high level, that's it. I know I had 5 minutes, so I'm going to take just a few minutes less. But for any additional information, schedule a call with us and talk further, please reach out to me directly. My email address is jmccormick. You see that, the right spelling of my last name there, at peoplesense.net. And I think on one of the slides someplace, I'm sure Jess has my phone number, but email gets it to me just as easily. Or if you contact the office, they'll get me the information that I need. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm going to pass things over to Brendan.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, Brendan, are you ready?
Yes, I believe so. I'll just need access to my screen. There we go.
Right there. Hit that. That puts you in presentation mode. And there you
Yeah,
go.
but I knew it was going to show this left one, right?
That's all right.
You're
Okay.
good. It's all yours. You got a couple minutes.
All right, let me go through here. So this is a little bit about M files. I'm just going to jump right into it. All right, so one thing to know about M files is that it is a purely metadata-driven platform. And in the enterprise content management or document management space, M files is the only purely metadata-driven platform. And there is a big reason that that is important. And I'm sure it's because you guys all remember these, the manila folders, right? They come with a plethora of problems, being space limitations, cluttered and disorganized, right? They don't scale well. If you keep investing into it, the problem gets worse. There's no security, no backups, slow search. I mean, the indexing and the cost of paper and ink, you're limited by storage. And then on top of that, the retention and compliance policies are a nightmare. So that really begs the question, right? Why are digital platforms still using folders? Right. So I'm going to run you guys through a scenario here. So we just kind of have the company, let's just call it folder system. So we have the sales by year. We have 2 different customers in here. We have a project, some quality management project, and then we have proposals by Jim and Andy. So the scenario I want to run you through is, well, what if Jim has a sales proposal to the customer ESTT from the year 2023? Does he put it in his proposal folder? Does he put it in the customer folder? Does he put it in the 2023 folder? Now, for other people to find that proposal, it becomes a nightmare. And well, if Jim's a really nice guy, he's thinking about other people. So he's going to put it in all the other folders because he knows other people might not use the same folder system as he does. Well, he puts it in Jim, he puts it in ESTT, he puts it in 2023. Well, now we've just created a problem with duplicates and versioning. So that really just drags us down to, right, it's confusing, it's frustrating. We have limited storage when we create problems with duplicates. There's no real-time updates, who's doing what, and then you have limited search because everyone knows there's some inconsistent naming conventions. So that brings the question, what is metadata? Metadata simply is data that describes data. And the great thing to know about it is you use it every single day. This is just an example of an Amazon search. So right, that first piece of data would be the shoes. Over 60,000 results on Amazon when I look that up. But then when I put in a description word, Nike, now it gets refined down to 20. And then the more I know about the product that I'm looking for, the more refined my results get. So we can apply that same concept to documents or even non-document objects. So this would kind of be our enterprise search. Right here, you see we just have a typical search bar like you would in Amazon. Now this would be a full-on, hey, we know exactly what we're looking for. And then that first document you see is exactly what we want. But let's say we don't know the back end, the more in-depth metadata that we're looking for. We just know that we're looking for an invoice. So if we were just to search invoice, right, there'd be thousands and thousands of documents. Well, then we have this dynamic facet search, which is just like filter boxes where we could then refine it by the company. All right, I know it's PeopleSense. So that brings us from 20,000 documents down to just maybe 3,000. And then, well, I know I'm looking for an AP invoice, so I could choose AP invoice, and then I know it's from the year 2025. And now I've just refined that document exactly to what I wanted it to be. All right, then we just have some dynamic views and metadata card. So this is the metadata card right here. And then these are the dynamic views. The way to think of views is they're like smart folders. It has a similar feeling to folders, but the metadata actually places the documents into the folders, so to speak, for you without having to manually drag them. And then we just kind of jump into workflow. Workflow automates how documents or even non-document objects move through a process. So, right, we just have a simple invoice validation. If it gets rejected, it goes back. If it gets approved, it keeps going. And then we have it to the payment status. And then this would be I put a dash line to like show that this would be an automation, right? And then it could get stored for audit, or a retention and deletion policy could be applied. Now, I do want to say that we do have some workflows, that could, the diagram, the web of it could even confuse some spiders. So they can get really crazy and we can get really advanced with that. This is just some basic AI stuff, right? I know would be kind of our chat box. You can ask it questions about a document in itself, say, translate this to Spanish, give me a summary, or you can interrogate your entire system, like show me all documents that are expiring within 45 days, or all contracts that are expiring. And then we kind of have some smart indexing here as well. So as soon as M-Files absorbs the document, well, it's going to say, oh, I know it's an AP invoice. Oh, this is what the name's going to be. Oh, it's for this customer. It read it from the document. Oh, it's this contact, this contract number, this start date. So basic problems that we solve: finding information. Am I working with the right information? Are rules being enforced, right? We have no source of truth. We have so many different repositories that information is getting stored in. Your business is relying on humans, right? We have to track processes. Scale, I always like to say, don't store your cash in a dumpster fire. And at the end of the day, right, it just can be extremely frustrating for a lot of people. We'll kind of skip this because we're on a little bit of a time constraint. And then here are just some other basic features that M-Files has. OCR, dashboards, it's extremely customizable. You have a history log of everything that's going on. Permissions, you can store your emails. Your information is interconnected with metadata and drop down, so you can always find something. Even if you're at a customer, you can find the correct document. You can offline, reminders and escalations, non-document objects, previewing, not even having to open up your documents, pinning and favorites, and then some external views. And this is my information right here. I'll leave it off. I know we're on a bit of a time constraint. Jess, you can take over my screen whenever, but thank you guys all so much for allowing me this time.
Brendan, a fantastic job. So I want to thank you very much. So Jess, I'll pass it over to you in a second. Wayne is going to be up next. I want to thank all of our customers who are on right now. I see a lot of you out there. So again, if you have questions, some have come in late. If you have questions, please get a hold of Jessica Canellis. Jess can show you at the end, we can show you her email address again. You can also come out to our website at peoplesenseerp.com. And Jess, there it is. And I will push it back over to Jess. Jess, it's to you.
Yep, and I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Wayne McDonald so he can talk to everybody about tariffs, which I know some people have said that they are very interested in. So Wayne, I will give it over to you.
So first of all, thank you all for attending first, and like to make sure, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
We can. Tariffs and how to manage.
Good. Very good. So a bit about myself. I'm a CPA out of Toronto. I work pretty much all over the world, and have written multiple tariff how shall I say, solution docs for at least 3 pieces of software. Okay, so what we're going to do is, because this topic, it's such a gray area in terms of options. I'm not actually going to show any screens. We're just going to talk the theoretics of it, and from a management point of view, what I've seen is how companies manage, and kind of the things you have to think about. But again, the key I want to mention is there is no one way to manage this. I'm going to kind of address, like in detail, one approach that I've seen, and I'll talk to kind of some other. In the document, I've kind of listed other ways that I've seen people do it, but again, this is there's just no right or wrong. And I was actually going to attend a CPA conference on it, but unfortunately, I had a time commitment. So the theory is, for basically the first point, the tariff is not controlled or specified by the vendor. Your purchase order never ever includes the tariff rate or anything like that, because your vendor has no control over that. The application of tariff is beyond the control of management. Management meaning that from a financial statement point of view, we might consider that to be a non-operating expense, because you can only think about, income from operations is what management has control of. You have no control over that at all. Now, that's a gray area. Some people finance people might say, Wayne, you're wrong. Well, it doesn't really matter. Most commonly, okay, is the inbound goods it's usually your logistics or freight management company is going to pay that tariff on your behalf and turn around and bill you. Independent at the point here is they're going to invoice you independently, and not necessarily in the same period as the vendor invoice is received, meaning that I might have the tariff expense in a different period than I might set up, like we would call an absorption for it. From an outbound point of view, there's absolutely no impact because you're just selling to whomever your customer is, and it's not the responsibility of the seller to collect, right? So again, the application of this, and the point here is there's quite a few different options that the CFO controller has, and there's no one right or wrong way. There just isn't. So I'm going to review some of the options, and by the way, I've seen every one of these done. The details and scope is way beyond the scope of this session because we've got half minute, 15, 20 minutes, whatever. This is more like a 2-hour discussion. So what sometimes we say is we absorb the tariff expense. What we're basically saying is we're going to increase our cost and not update pricing. Essentially means that your margin is negatively impacted. The second one is absorb the tariff expense, updating the inventory cost, and updating pricing. Essentially what we're saying here is we're passing the cost on to the customer. The third one is you just pay it and eat it, right? But that means you're taking one heck of a potentially hit depending on your company. And the interesting thing is I've seen combinations and various combinations of all of these. I've seen some customers say, okay, look, I'm going to absorb by the way, the most common one I've seen is the second one, where I basically update my inventory cost. But what they did is they didn't update the full tariff. They updated, I think it was in 2017, 2018. So instead of taking, I think it was 20%, what they did is they updated 10% and the company ate 10%. Yeah. So the choice here and point here, the choice really depends on the company, the industry, and I'm saying the price elasticity of the product sold, meaning what's your flexibility to raise prices. If you're in the automotive sector, good luck. So option one, and this is basically, this is usually from a financial point of view, this is kind of what the solution that I personally like. So the point is, first of all, it's assumed that much like other cost types, the labor, fixed overhead, variable overhead, that we're using the concept of an over-under application of an overhead, because essentially what we want to do is we want to put use the tariff as the material overhead, such that what I do is if I have something that's $100 and it's 25%, I'm going to set the material cost to 100, the material overhead to $25. And so on an inventory receipt, I debit inventory 125, I credit the accrued receipts account 100, and I credit the the tariff absorbed $25. And then when the invoice comes in from my supplier, from my logistics company, then I would debit the tariff expense. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, they net out to zero. We don't live in a perfect world. So the other point here is that if the net of the tariff expense and the material overhead applied is in a credit balance, it basically means we've over applied the rate on our material overhead rate, all things being equal, meaning that if we had no timing differences, that we've got it too high. Now, conversely, if it's in a debit balance, it means our tariff absorption rate was too low, and we're impacting gross margin. Okay, I'm not necessarily talking to exactly the text on the screen. I'm just kind of reviewing this. So, the point two here is we stress that a thorough review of the tariffs on a monthly basis is really the prudent exercise. And it's very common to review these and all the other cost of goods sold over prevailing. Usually you do it over a quarterly basis to try and adjust for seasonality of timing, because again, nothing ever comes, there tends to be a pretty strong a case where the timings are always off. Now, the third point is a really tricky point, because I'm assuming you're not using the material overhead. But what if you are? What if you're using already 10% and all of a sudden now here's Wayne saying, oh boy, let's put, the 20 or 25% or whatever the tariff is. Then you're kind of in a tricky point, because we only have one field available. However, in a case like that, what I would personally do is I would set the tariff and your existing material, like sum them together, and I would do an allocation to break out what is your allowance for freight and landed cost versus a tariff, because they're unrelated. One thing has nothing to do with the other. But again, there just is no right or wrong way to do this. So if we're going to do that, from a configuration point of view, and again, high level. So what do we have to do? You typically want to have a tariff paid and a tariff absorbed. The tariff paid account, that's where we're going to, when we get our invoice from our logistics company, that's where we're going to say, okay, debit tariff expense, credit payable, done. And the tariff absorbed account, that's kind of the focus of this, because that's where we're saying that in the earlier case I said, I buy something for 100, there's 25 tariffs. So it's, again, debit inventory 125, credit goods received not invoiced or accrued receipts 100, credit tariff absorbed. And that is going to be continued on putting either a rate or an amount on the material overhead, and you have to make sure that all your settings for the material overhead account point directly at that absorbed account. Now, and I just the fourth point here, the setting should be pointed at this account. Now, I had one customer say, well, I don't necessarily want the tariff expense and the absorption to be in the P&L, because I want to, on a periodic basis, I want to take the net of that and write it to the P&L. So they set it up as liability accounts. Again, is that right or wrong? There's no real 100%. So just I point here from an analysis point of view. Imagine for a moment we've got $100,000 of inventory. It doesn't, in this case, doesn't matter whether it's average or standard cost, it would be subject to tariffs. If we put a 20% tariff, that's going to basically gross my inventory up by 20,000, so that my carrying my inventory at 120,000. Again, update material overhead rate. And I said not necessarily the amount, because you can either put a percentage or you can use an amount. You would update your material and roll cost. Now, you're going to update your inventory instantaneously. And somebody might argue, well, wait a minute, I wasn't paying tariffs and now I have this tariff absorbed account. Well, don't forget that as that inventory starts to move out, some of that inventory was not tariffed, but it's going to have the higher cost. So that's why the third point here is you may wish to reallocate some of that against the cost of goods. So it doesn't change net income at all. You just have a plus in one place and a minus in another. What if you're an average cost? And this, by the way, you got to be careful of this one here, because if I've got $100,000 of inventory, obviously depending on the quantities, the individual quantities and the unit costs. But if I go and say, okay, I'm putting a percentage on, that only applies to the next PO receipt. Well, what about if I have, if I'm not receiving that much? It's kind of deceiving, because you're not going to get that instantaneously cost increase to your inventory, and your margin with each subsequent receipt each subsequent work order complete is not necessarily going to increase in the way that it should. So unfortunately, there's no easy way around this, other than for me, I would probably just try and not necessarily put the percent in, but just force in the item cost card, the average cost field. And I'll tell you right now, don't ask me to do that. Talk to Jeff Vasquez. He'll eat this up blindfolded. Right, Jeff? Unfortunately, I didn't put a clock in front of me, so I don't know how I'm doing time. Jessica, I think I got 4 minutes.
Yeah, you're good.
So I'm gonna again, this is brief, right? To have this in a more in-depth conversation, you really, you talk to Jim, talk to Gary to arrange a time to talk in more detail. But just from a 4-minute perspective, any questions, concerns, anything I can address in 4 minutes?
Let's see. No, we do not. So we are doing tips and tricks for Intuitive as well. So these are parts of tips to know how better to use your software with things like tariffs. Just throwing that out there for everybody. And it looks like we do not have any more questions. So thank you, Wayne, for
Wayne, thank you
coming
so
today.
much. I know that you have a very busy schedule.
I apologize.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would say again, thank you to the customers. As we say, we don't exist without you. We really don't.
Yes, that is true. Wayne, thanks again.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jessica, you got to tell me how to stop sharing.
That's okay. I got you. So we will.
He'll take it.
Excuse me. We will move on to our next segment with Tim Lindsay if he is ready.
Hi Tim, how you doing?
For multi warehouse planning inventory. I think I said that correctly.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump off. Take care, everybody.
Wayne, thank you again. I look forward. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
All right, Tim, if you're ready, pass it on over.
Pull this up.
So Tim, you're a little low in voice-wise.
All right, let me turn my volume up. Hold on. Is that any better?
Yes,
It's coming
I can
online.
hear you better.
There we go. Okay, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time for my voice. I'm battling a cold, and I sound like a very, very deep voice radio announcer. So if I sniffle, that's what's going on.
Yeah, I think I need you a little closer to the microphone. That's the only
There we go. How's that?
Oh, perfect. Gotcha.
Okay,
now.
good.
Nice.
All right, good. So this is going to be a brief overview. It's kind of an introduction into the whole concept of multiple warehouse planning. And there's a couple of different scenarios that we'll talk about and then the setup. So here we go. And this actually came up in a recent discussion between Jeff Van Ness and I, where the customer was using this. And I thought, well, let's put it out there and let people get to know a little bit about it. So what I want to cover during this session is to talk about what multi-warehouse planning really talks about, what it is all about, what kind of environments it fits in, what kind of functionality we're looking at. We'll talk about different environments in which multi-warehouse planning might take place. We'll take a look at the differences in the planning and execution flows when you're dealing with multiple warehouses. And then we'll talk about some of the foundation data that needs to be established that can get used by the system for this. So let's talk about some of the prefixes or some of the pre-existing conditions that have to be in place before we can get into multi-warehouse planning. First of all, this requires that a good portion, it doesn't have to be all, but a good portion of your inventory is going to be tracked by warehouse and location within the system. It also is predicated on the concept that there is actually more than one warehouse in use as defined in your system. It also assumes that you're using either MRP or CTP, capable to promise, to do your material planning. And it also assumes that each of the warehouses that you have defined has demand and supply activity that is specific to that warehouse. Now, the demand and supply activity might be independent to each warehouse without any reaching across the border into other warehouses, or that demand and supply activity may actually flow between warehouses. So let me give you a few examples as to what I'm talking about. Let's say that you have, in order to reduce your delivery charges and your freight costs, you've actually set up more than one production facility. You may build the same product, but you might have a factory in Massachusetts and you might have a factory in California, and they make the same product, but they use vendors that are close to them and they service customers that are close to them, thereby saving freight charges and delivery charges. In that case, you might have each of them set up as a separate warehouse. You're booking sales orders that specify which warehouse that product is going to ship out of, depending on who the customer is. And based on that demand source of the sales order, you're then running MRP in each of the warehouses, and it is launching purchase orders and work order recommendations that are specific only to that warehouse. Another possible scenario is that you have a feeder plant situation where you have one factory that does fabrication and let's say that, well, the example that I have from a recent customer is they have one plant that does circuit board stuffing, and that's their specialty. They fabricate circuit boards. And they have a number of customers to whom they provide circuit boards. But this company also has another production facility some distance away that actually does assembly work of electronic units that use some of those circuit boards. And so the circuit board facility is actually a feeder plant. They are a source of supply to the assembly plant. And so in that particular case, when a requirement shows up in the planning module from the assembly area, that needs to be passed over as a requirement to the circuit board factory so they can supply it. So that's that, where one warehouse is actually supplying parts to the other warehouse. Another potential model is that you have a distribution center where all they do is sell product. And in order to meet customer demand, they try to maintain certain levels of inventory. And they manage that with, say, reorder points or safety stock. When they notice that a particular product has dropped below its order point, they then request a supply of more from the facility that actually produces the product. So in this particular case, the distribution center is requesting a supply from the fabrication or the manufacturing plant to fulfill their inventory requirements. Or a final model might be that we need to store or warehouse certain components or materials that are either too large or the quantities are too big, or there are logistical issues, and we might have a offsite warehouse for our components or materials. And as the need for those materials comes up in our production facility, we basically want to do a pull request on the storage facility. And again, the storage facility might have their own set of replenishment plans so that they can make sure that they always have plenty of inventory to supply the production facility. So this is kind of the distribution model flipped on its head, where instead of goods flowing from production to the distribution center, materials are now flowing from the warehousing facility to the production facility. So all of these models would be supported by setting up multiple warehouses. In the case of the first one, each of the production facilities would be defined as a separate warehouse. So would the second instance, where the feeder production and the assembly area both have their own warehouses defined. The distribution centers would have their own warehouses defined separate from the production facility, as would the material storage. The key here is that even though we are defining multiple warehouses and are able to track and plan inventory within those warehouses, we're still sitting in the same database. So we're hitting one general ledger. Our inventory numbers are consolidated across these physical sites. And so we are really treating them as being under one financial umbrella, but we have different planning and stocking needs within each of those facilities. So here's an example of how the planning flow typically happens when your multiple warehouses are completely independent of each other. This is the East Coast, West Coast model, where sales orders are being entered, but as they're being entered, they are specifying the warehouse out of which they are going to ship. So the sales orders are flagged with a warehouse identifier. We then run MRP separately against each warehouse. And this is a capability that we'll look at as how you set those flags when you run MRP. But basically, we would run MRP against warehouse 1. It would then generate warehouse-specific purchase order recommendations and warehouse-specific work order recommendations. The purchase orders, when received, would be coming into warehouse 1. The component materials would be issued out of warehouse 1 to the work orders. When the work orders are completed, they're received back into warehouse 1, and then when the sales order is shipped, it ships out of warehouse 1. So everything stays within the confines of warehouse 1. Same thing for warehouse 2. Everything stays within the confines of warehouse 2. And in this particular case, it really doesn't matter which order we run MRP, because those two MRP runs are completely independent of each other, and one warehouse doesn't know what the other warehouse is doing. However, when we get into a multi-warehouse environment where there is cross-warehouse demand and supply, these are the other examples that I gave on the previous slide. Now, a couple of things change. First of all, warehouse 2 is aware of the fact that some of the items that might be required during an MRP run are actually coming from warehouse 1. And what happens is, in that case, MRP, in addition to planning purchase orders and planning work orders, is also going to generate a new kind of record called a demand transfer record, which identifies the fact that even though the requirement, even though the demand is against warehouse 2, the supply actually comes from warehouse 1. And this demand transfer record is recognized as a source of demand when the warehouse 1 MRP is run. And you'll notice that in this particular model for warehouse 1, I've also made the sales order kind of a dotted line. If warehouse 1 is a supply warehouse, a storage warehouse, then the only requirement source is going to come from the MRP of warehouse 2. But if it's a distribution center, I might be booking sales orders. The key here is that when demand transfers are in play, when you have cross-warehouse planning, the sequence in which you run MRP becomes important. In other words, I would need, in this model, to run MRP for warehouse 2 first. That generates the demand transfer record, which then is picked up when I run MRP in warehouse 1. So let's talk a little bit about the planning and execution flow. And those of you who are currently using MRP on a regular basis, you're not going to see any surprises here. The first thing that you do prior to running your material plan is that you create or verify or fixate your independent demand sources. And these can be sales orders. You might be running against a sales forecast, which is another source of independent demand. You might be maintaining a master production schedule, or you may have some items that are under reorder point control, and therefore when an item dips below its order point, what Intuitive calls an order point intrusion, that is then recognized as an independent demand source. So all of those items are maintained and validated. Then you run MRP. You get your planned purchase orders and your planned work orders as a result of that MRP run. You convert those planned POs as needed. You convert your planned work orders as needed. And then you use your exception reports to adjust any open orders that MRP feels need to be realigned with the new demand pattern if that has changed since the last MRP run. And this can include things like customers requesting a delivery date that was earlier than the original sales order called for, or if you're supplying, construction industry, they're saying, where we have a delay in the project, we need to push that out, or we need to bump a quantity. Any of those things might have an impact on an order that is already in process, and the exception reports will recommend changes to those orders to bring them back into alignment with the demand pattern. You receive your purchase orders as you normally would, you complete and receive your work orders, and then you ship your sales orders. So that's kind of in a nutshell the normal planning and execution flow that we experience when we're running a single warehouse and running MRP and following the plan to get product out the door. In the cross-warehouse environment, things change a little bit. In addition to sales orders and forecasts and master production schedules and reorder points, the demand transfers are considered a source of independent demand to the warehouse in which they're being planned. They are independent demand because from the point of view of the warehouse that receives the demand transfer, there's nothing above that item in the bill of material. The demand, the recognition of that item being needed as a result of a higher level BOM was done by the warehouse that originated the demand transfer. But to the receiving warehouse, the demand transfer is seen as independent demand. So now the flow continues as normal. We run MRP, we convert our orders, we adjust the open orders, we receive POs, receive our work orders, and then we fulfill those demand transfers. So once the inventory becomes available, there is a screen in Intuitive where I can call up the demand transfer and actually move the parts from the supplying warehouse to the requesting warehouse, which is, you can kind of think of it as a cross-warehouse shipment, if you will, and you'll actually see that there are transit time elements built into the system when you start to set up this relationship between warehouses. And then you ship your normal sales orders. Now, here's where I once again want to emphasize that the warehouse planning sequence needs to be, think of it as top-down. And I use the term top-down because typically you can determine the sequence of warehouse MRP by taking a look at the multiple levels of the bill of materials. So another way of saying this is you want to run MRP against the warehouse that is going to create the demand transfer before you run MRP against the warehouse that is going to receive the demand transfer. Now, it's rare and not necessarily recommended, but there have been some situations in the past where a customer with more than one warehouse actually was sending demand transfers back and forth between those two warehouses. So warehouse 1 would create a demand transfer on warehouse 2, and when warehouse 2 ran its MRP, it needed parts from warehouse 1, so a demand transfer was created to warehouse 1, and Jim Stenner, who used to work for Intuitive at the time, referred to this as the ping pong effect, and it really raised a lot of questions as to, okay, what order do we run MRP if we're sending parts back and forth between warehouses? And that's where we said, well, if you take a look at the bill of material and you plan the top levels in the warehouse where they're going to be produced, and then work your way down through the bill of material, you'll probably be safe. But it is an important question to address during the use of multi-warehouse. Let's talk a little bit now about the foundation data setup, and there's really only 3 places in the system where this gets defined. There are 2 places where planning parameters are developed and stored, and these are the rules that the system uses to decide what kind of planned order and what the nature of that planned order is going to be when MRP is running. One set of planning parameters, as we're all familiar with, exists inside the item card. And this is typically where we put our planning parameters if I'm only planning in one warehouse. But if I'm going to be planning in multiple warehouses, specifically between warehouses, then the second place that we're going to set up information is in the item warehouse planning parameters form. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. And then there are some specific MRP settings that we want to pay attention to when we're actually running dynamic MRP. And we'll take a look at what those are in order to support this cross-warehouse planning that we're talking about. So here in the item card, these should be familiar to anybody today who's running MRP. This is where you set things like safety stock and order points. Your order policy code is the determiner of how MRP interprets the required quantity and converts it into a planned order quantity. There are also some flags that might have an impact on how MRP calculates lead times, whether or not MRP is actually even going to create a planned order for this item, and so forth. So these are obviously going to be set up for any item that is going to be planned using MRP. And there might be some items that do not require this cross warehouse activity, in which case this would be the only place that you would have to set up your planning parameters. You've got a couple of instances where it's sufficient to put your planning parameters into the item card. One is this item is not going to participate in cross-warehouse activity, but the other aspect of that is that this item only exists in this warehouse. The other warehouse does not use it. So if you have the same part number, the same item ID that's being used in more than one warehouse, and you want to run warehouse-specific MRP, and you want MRP to plan that item differently depending on which warehouse it's in, then you need to set up item warehouse planning parameters. Or if you have an item that is going to be passed between warehouses, you're going to have to set up item warehouse planning parameters. So here's the item warehouse planning parameter screen, and here you can see that, let me make this a little bit bigger, that in addition to identifying the item ID, you're also specifying the warehouse. So here we're saying, this is how I want MRP to treat this item in the context of an MRP run within this specific warehouse. And for the cross warehouse activity, you can set a source warehouse. So if warehouse 1 needs this part to be supplied by warehouse 2, then on this screen, I would designate that part number within warehouse 1, saying that this comes from warehouse 2. That is my source warehouse. The next field, the demand transfer to item ID, actually allows you to say, even though warehouse 1 calls this widget A, warehouse 2 calls it widget B. I don't recommend using this because it can cause some confusion, but it might be a situation that comes up and you do have that flexibility. And then the third major change on this screen is the transit lead time. So if your two facilities are a significant distance apart geographically, you want to allow some additional time to have that part get from warehouse 2 to warehouse 1 once the demand transfer has been fulfilled. And then we have all the other fields where we have safety stock and order point, the order policy codes and so forth, and the things that would appear normally on the item planning parameters form, but are available here as well. And this is what allows you can say, well, in one warehouse, I want this item to be planned discretely, but in the other warehouse, I want it to be planned lot for lot, for example, or min-max mult. Finally, on the dynamic MRP screen itself, the area that I have highlighted here is where we specify that we're running warehouse-specific MRP. So you notice I've got the radio button set for plan only warehouse. So here's where I would say I need to plan warehouse 1 first, so I run MRP for warehouse 1. Then I would specify that I'm running MRP for warehouse 2. Then if I have parts that are indigenous only to one warehouse and the supply and demand only exists inside that warehouse, or I have parts that are not under location control, then I can do a final MRP run that says all warehouses and check the checkbox that says preserve previous warehouse-specific planned orders. And that way, the plan for the specific warehouses stays intact, and MRP only generates any additional planned orders for the items that are not location controlled, warehouse and location controlled. And I think I've gone pretty much right up to my time element, but are there any questions at this point?
I do not see any questions. But thank you, Tim. And thank you for doing this, even though you have a cold.
That's fine, my pleasure.
Yes. So thank you. And then we will go ahead and go on to our last section of the day. If Larry is ready, he's going to go over alerts and workflows. So Larry, if you're ready, I will pass it over to you.
Hi, this is Larry. I'm ready. Go ahead and pass it over.
All right.
Larry, thank you.
Let's see, it should be that guy right there. And I want to there we go. So you guys should be able to see the slide of Knowledge Sync and presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
We can.
All right. So first of all, a little introduction. I'm Larry Newby, and I'm a technical consultant with PeopleSense. Sorry, trying to get myself fully underway here so I can see everything. There we go. All right. I have over 20 years of experience working with Intuitive ERP and products that can be used to enhance Intuitive ERP software. This work has recently led me to do implementations of the Knowledge Sync product for a number of Intuitive customers. I'm going to start today with some slides that are intended to help you answer the following 3 questions. What is Knowledge Sync? What does it do? And do we need it? I'll also show you some of the tools that it provides. Your ERP system provides a lot of information, It provides tools to enter and track things like customer orders, invoices, payments, work orders, purchase orders, inventory receipts, inventory levels, just to name a few things. Your ERP system also provides tools like MRP and CRP to generate things like purchase orders, work orders, pick lists, shipping lists, and invoices to create the documents that your company requires to function. Yet you still must rely upon a number of knowledgeable users to run reports and analyze the data to look for signs of common problems. And then they have to take timely action to address those issues. So why not automate some of these processes? You already know the common things that you need to look for. You also know who you need to send this information to. In many cases, you also know what needs to be done. And you can also automate routine tasks so that your users can focus on more important tasks. So what is Knowledge Sync? Knowledge Sync is an application that can be used to monitor your database for specified conditions, and when found, respond to them. Knowledge Sync lets you automate. If this activity or condition happens, then do that. So here are a number of ways that companies are using Knowledge Sync. This list is just intended to give you some idea of the many ways it can be utilized. One of the most common uses is to automate routine tasks. Are you already sending out sales order acknowledgements? If you are, is this task consuming someone's time? If you aren't, could this reduce ordering mistakes? When an order is shipped, are you currently sending your customer notice with the tracking number? Would they like that? Are you currently sending out invoices through the mail? Sorry, did I hear the question? Nope. Okay, sorry. Why not send them out via email and save the time associated with stuffing envelopes and the cost of postage? When you enter a new purchase order, Knowledge Sync can automatically email that PO to the vendor. If this is an outplant PO, there may be some supporting drawings that you always want to be sent to the vendor as well. And Knowledge Sync could do that as well. You probably have someone that's calling your vendors to get updated delivery commitments when you discover that the PO is past due. But how quickly is that currently being accomplished? These are just a few of the things that Knowledge Sync might do for your company. Here are some additional examples. Some of these are more oriented towards alerts to let the right people know when specific type of situation exists so that they can quickly address it. And some are geared toward improving your cash flow. So, if there are past due sales orders, then send a list to an expediter to get this resolved. If there are unshipped sales orders with required dates within 3 days, then send a report to an expediter to get that resolved. If an invoice is 5 days past due, then send the customer a friendly reminder with a copy of the invoice. And if it is the first of the month, then send customers a copy of their statement report with messages that can vary depending upon the amount past due. And if there are past due work orders, then send a report to the department manager. So this is one example of Knowledge Sync output. On the left, you see the email message that was sent out. And this is just sending out sales order acknowledgements to your customer. So, you can word the message any way you like to say thank you for your order and be specific about what order we're talking about and ask them to review it, make sure that it's accurate, and to get back in touch with your salespeople if there's any changes necessary. And you can see that there's an attachment, which is shown there on the right, which is an exact, it's just simply a PDF copy of the sales order that you would generate if you ask Intuitive to generate the sales order acknowledgement for you, complete with your logos and all that sort of stuff that you have set up. Now here's another example, and in this particular case, the process is dealing with a customer that has a past due balance. The company in this case, because it's sensitive communication, they didn't want the message to be sent automatically from Knowledge Sync directly to the customer. Instead, they wanted one of their internal people to review the information and determine what was the most appropriate course of action. Even in this situation, we can make that internal person more efficient in this process. So what we've done is we've put together a potential email message on the bottom half of this email message that could be copied and forwarded, or just modify the top and send off this message to the customer. We've also supplied the accounting person with the available information out of the system that they might require, the available email messages or email addresses, sorry, and their phone numbers, so that if they decide that they really need to call this customer and speak to them about the problem, they could do that as well. So even point there is, even if you're not wanting Knowledge Sync to communicate directly with your customer, you can still help make your internal people more efficient about doing that process. So if you know what you're looking for, who needs to know about it, and what action needs to be taken, why not automate the process? And that's what Knowledge Sync does. Two main uses for Knowledge Sync. One is task automation. So, like if you have many business processes like invoicing, collections, PO approvals, et cetera, that are done manually, either wholly or in part, Knowledge Sync can automate those processes, and in doing so, free up staff time to focus on more high-value tasks. Another key way that it's used is exception management automation. So that's, you probably have people currently printing out reports, going through them with a highlighter, marking the things that they're concerned about, and then going out and doing something about that. So you can automate that process as well to have Knowledge Sync identify those situations that that person's normally doing with a highlighter and send them just the information they need so that they can get out there and do whatever they need to do. So the benefits of Knowledge Sync are, by automating if-then business processes, it will save you time and money, makes you more responsive, and it can increase your knowledge by identifying things that you might have missed. So Knowledge Sync contains a number of different elements that help it work. Technically speaking, Knowledge Sync runs in a Windows environment. A cloud-based version is also available. It has a browser-based front end and uses SQL Server databases. It can monitor most any type of database, as well as websites and incoming email. It can send out notifications via email messages, text messages, or use FTP services. It can be used to generate most any type of documents. It can utilize Crystal Reports and SQL Server reporting services or other third-party reporting tools, such as those in Intuitive version 9.0.12, which is, in that version of Intuitive, they added a a way of requesting from outside of the system that a particular report is generated. And so most of the processes that I put together these days with Knowledge Sync and Intuitive are using that function rather than recreating the report in Crystal or SSRS. We simply just ask Intuitive for the report we want and then send a copy of that to the customer or vendor or whoever it is. It can also generate charts and graphs to assist with the analysis of the data. And it can also run SQL queries to update your application to do things like change the status or sync data or to initiate follow-up actions. Knowledge Sync software does not require a dedicated server. It's typically installed on your existing SQL Server system. It's built with .NET and uses SQL Server databases itself, so it's all current technology. It has a browser-based front end, so it can be accessed from anywhere that has access to that IP address and the associated port. The Knowledge Sync software has 3 groups of controls. The event designer, which is up here in this portion, used to build events and queries, etc. The monitor, this section right here, which is used to see what's happening or is scheduled. And the administration section down here at the bottom, which is used to make system-wide settings. Here you can see that I've gone into the application events and into a folder identified as Intuitive ERP 9.0. Right here, here's Intuitive ERP 9.0, and there I've selected events. These folders help you organize your processes, and you can have as many as you want. Within this folder, I've selected events. And then I clicked on the edit icon for one of the associated events named here, clicking on this button to edit it. Sales order acknowledgements email. So that we can see the event designer for that particular event. As you can see, the event designer provides a simple framework for setting up an event or process. It provides a place to set up a schedule here. Sorry, I just switched slides inadvertently. Okay. So it provides a place to set up a schedule and a place to define one or more triggers for this process, and a place to define one or more deliverables. So in this particular case, the event's been scheduled to run every 5 minutes. It uses query named sales order ACK trigger here to check to see if there are any sales orders that are ready to be processed. If the trigger returns any records, then each of them will cause an email message to be sent out with a copy of the Intuitive sales order acknowledgement report in a PDF file attached to it. And then it will run a SQL query to update that record to show that it was processed. That's the email file and submit SQL deliverables. While we're looking at this form, I'd like to point out a very useful option, which is right over here, the repeat notifications for triggered items. It is a simple way that Knowledge Sync provides to track the things that it's processed. So we often want to only process a given record once, say an invoice. We only want to send it out once. So Knowledge Sync provides a tool that automatically keeps track of this whatever you've identified as the key. In this particular case, it would be sales orders. And if I uncheck that, then it would only allow me to, it would only send out that sales order one time. In this particular case, I chose not to utilize that because we designed it so that if there were changes to the sales order after it was initially entered, you could send out the sales order acknowledgments for the revised order as well. Each of the sections of this form, schedule, triggers, and deliverables, have tools in the system to help you build them. For instance, here is the query designer, query editor, that can be used to build or modify your trigger query. It allows you to select the tables and fields that contain the required data. So when you first open this up, it automatically brings up all the tables and views that are in the database that you're monitoring, in this case, Intuitive database. And it allows you to select the fields and tables and fields. So you select one of these tables over here, it automatically then shows you the fields, and you click on the arrow to add those sections to, or those fields to your output on this query. It also has a filter section that allows you to filter out the records based on whatever criteria you're looking for, specific types of sales orders, order conditions like open or ready to print, that sort of thing. And it also provides you a way to, you can click on SQL to see the SQL that gets generated, and there's a preview to actually see the records that it's currently. And this is an example of the preview for that particular process. So moving on to the deliverables section, here I've selected the email deliverables so that you can see the built-in HTML editor that's used to build the email message that the process will be sending out. Use also a box here to check if you wanted to send out this message as plain text to avoid using HTML if that was your preference. If you look closely, you see that there are a number of variables in the message that's been constructed here. You know, hi, primary contact first name, primary contact last name. Those are variables selected from this list that comes from your query, and you just double click on those things to add that value in the place that you've selected. Sales order ID here. So you can structure this message with as much information as you want to provide out of your query. So as in this case, we wanted to send the message in a personalized fashion with the customer's first name and last name. So we've addressed that desire here in this way that this is structured. And typically, when I'm setting one of these things up, I have to take into account the fact that the customer's first and last name might not be in the database. So I'll build that into my query so that if it's not available, if that value is null, then it'll come up with an alternative like customer, for instance, or valued customer, for instance. The subscribers section down here in the bottom allows you to specify who is going to receive the message. The standard subscribers are typically for internal email addresses, while the advanced subscribers are generally for email addresses that are being extracted from the database by the trigger query. In this case, the trigger query is getting the email addresses from a number of different fields and tables. Since some of these fields may be empty, it's choosing the best email address based upon a priority sequence. And that's what's going to be used. So you see here that I've selected best email is what I named the field that provides the choice to be used. So back to our example that I showed earlier, this is the resulting output of that process. The monitor is a tool in KnowledgeSync that provides a number of logs that can be used to see what is pending, processed, or if there have been any errors recorded. So, for instance, here I've selected the Application Events Monitor, which gives a top-level look at what's happening in KnowledgeSync. The Pending tab up here shows you events that are either about to be submitted or that has been submitted and is in an error state. The Checked tab there shows you a list of events that were successfully executed. However, it may not be triggered. So, if a query runs and it's successfully executed, or that process was successfully executed, but there were no records to be processed, then that's considered to be checked. And then on the Triggered tab, which is what we have selected in this example, it actually had records to process, and it processed those records. So that's what we see here, is each of the sales order acknowledgments out of that query being processed and sent off to the vendor or customer in this case. And then there's an Errors tab that allows you to see any errors that may have happened and allow you to analyze that and determine what to do about that particular situation. And if you want to see more about any of these events, we can click on the plus out here to see the details for that particular item. And so here's one that popped up whenever I clicked on that details. So beyond that, the application events, there's monitors for each of the different things. So here I have selected the email delivery monitor, and I've clicked on the error tab to see some errors that have happened. And so you can see here that this one, the first one at the top, was unable to locate the file that it was supposed to attach, so it couldn't send that message. And the one below that had a problem with authentication of the login and password that were associated with the email service that KnowledgeSync was set up to use. This is just a couple of quick examples of the kinds of error information that are available by the monitor. Okay. So that's the overview of the KnowledgeSync system. If you would like to see some of the details, if you'd like me to answer any questions, or if you'd like me to show you my KnowledgeSync system and point out any parts of it that you might be curious about, please let me know what you'd like.
So I do have one question. They asked if KnowledgeSync is the same as EMF.
No, KnowledgeSync and EMF are competing products. EMF is a product sold by Aptian and developed by them. EMF is. NodSync is a product that's built by another company, and we offer it. And PeopleSense offers it, and we do consulting on NodSync.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Now is the time to ask if you guys have questions. We have our consultants on here who would be happy to help. I will give them a couple minutes and I'll switch over to our contact sheet. So if you guys do end up having questions later, you can contact any single one of us here.
And remember, we still have companies on with us right now. Also, if you have any suggestions for us, please let us know. We do this twice a year. We used to go for a full day for like 7 hours and have different partners coming in and out, but that became too long. People would come in and out. We'd like to know what you would like on our next webinar, and we're looking at September, October. Is that correct, Jess?
Yes. So if you guys just let us know any topics that you want to discuss, or if there's like a certain functionality or maybe like a customization, we could put something together for that for you as well.
And we're here to help you even with free questions about your own system. So if you're like, hey, why is this not working, or why is this? We don't mind answering those now too for you. So we have people on line here that might be able to help you. If not, Gary would be able to get back to you, within today or tomorrow, with questions that you might have. And if you don't want to put it in the chat, you can always email Jessica also.
Yes, you can email me, you can email Gary, you can also call Gary. He loves talking one-on-one with you guys so he can get to know your issues better. So we also appreciate that. If you guys do need any help with any of your Intuitive systems, no matter what version you're on, you can always put a ticket in on our PeopleSense ERP .com so we can get that going, get you a consultant, and get your matters taken care of as well. But it looks like we do not have any questions at this time.
All right.
Is
Well,
there
I want to
anything?
thank all of the companies, all of my staff, everyone for helping out. Larry, thank you so much. I know some people have dropped off. Thank you again. Jess, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Is there anything anyone would like to say before we go, Gary, or anything?
Gary, I know you're there, but I don't know if you have any questions or you want to say anything to anybody. I don't think so. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Jess, thank you so much. And this video will be on probably by Friday or before.
Yep, so thank you, everybody, for your time and also attending this. So everyone have a great rest of your day and let us know how we can help you.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye, Larry. Thanks.